Episode 105 of Five Drinks or Midnight. Another show, we bring the questions, guests bring the drinks. We try to wrap up before midnight. Today we got a good one. We are talking to Mark A. Vierthaler, head distiller at Whiskey Del Bac. But before we do, like and subscribe, hit the bells, the whistles, leave a comment if you like what we're doing. Let's get started. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Five Drinks or Midnight. 5 drinks, 5 questions. Midnight, whatever comes first. How you doing today, sir?
I am doing outstanding. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Yes, thank you for joining us. Again, we know how freaking busy you are, so again, we really appreciate it. I guess the first question is, what are we drinking first?
Well, first thing we are going to be sipping on is our Whiskey Del Bac Classic. This is kind of the perfect thing to get us started in. A little bit of background. There we go. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful bottle. So that is kind of the impetus for Whiskey Del Bac. What we are sipping on, a little bit of history of the distillery. So we were founded back in 2011 now. So we're coming up on 12 years, and founded by Stephen Paul, his daughter Amanda. The kind of Cliff's Notes version of how we came about. Stephen and his wife Elaine actually owned a furniture shop here in Tucson, really kind of specialized in mesquite furniture. If you're not familiar with mesquite, it's this very beautiful, very twisty, very complex hardwood. And Stephen would say, he'd take the chips home from working on furniture and he'd always burn them, either barbecuing in the fire pit. And I say, I'm contractually obligated to tell this joke. There go our profits up in smoke. Check. I have done my job.
Yep.
But yeah, so he and his wife Elaine were big Scotch drinkers. And one of the evenings, Elaine was like, hey, people use peat to dry malt in Scotland. Has anyone ever considered using mesquite to do the same? And Stephen's the kind of guy that once he gets this idea, he kind of becomes obsessed with it and really digs in. And so taught himself how to floor malt, taught himself how to distill.
Wow.
And while the original idea was, again, this mesquited, what we call it mesquited, not peated, American single malt, he wanted to kind of dial in the recipe before we even added smoke. Smoke's very divisive. Smoke can, really turn people off. And so that's how Classic was born. Classic was born out of this idea of, he always says, not in flavor profile, but in quality level to like a Macallan 12. Okay. So this idea of creating a complex, nuanced, but accessible American single malt. So that's kind of why we call it our classic. It is our 100% unsmoked malt. It is distilled twice on a copper pot system. I always say we take about 3/4 of the way through the Scottish model. We're doing off-grain fermentation. We're doing off-grain distillation, double copper pot. When we get to the aging, though, that's when we actually break with that tradition. And we could actually, I don't know, I hate to keep us away from a little sip of this. So.
No, it's just smelling damn good. So that's why I was like, oh.
So this is, like I say, we're doing 100% malted barley. Where we break with that Scottish tradition, though, is we are actually going into quarter casks. So we're going into 15-gallon barrels. So we're immediately going away from the 53 or larger. And instead of going into used cooperage like they do in Scotland, we are exclusively doing our initial aging in medium plus toast, number 3 char, brand new American white oak. So we are going in with those really heavy oak influences. We are wanting to really accentuate those vanillas, those tannins. It's kind of it's our brash American take on that Scottish model. And people are also then floored, they taste this. Our average age on this guy is 12 months.
Okay.
we have some advantages. You know, we're in the Sonoran Desert. The whole distillery was designed as this love letter for the Sonoran Desert. We have really, really, really dry years. We're in the middle of what we call monsoon now, is where we actually do get a little bit of rain, but we have really low relative humidity. And then in 24 hours, we have these really aggressive temperature fluctuations, this push and pull. So we are getting just an insane amount of interaction on that oak in a really, really short frame of time. And so we start censoring at 10 months. Average age is 12. Longest we're going to let this sit is 15. You let it sit, It becomes really cloying, really astringent, really bitey. But yeah, that's the classic. That's what we're sipping on now.
Oh, and it's glorious. It's really nice. This is just,
you get those really big blossoms of like butterscotch and vanilla on that nose. And then for me, like the palate, I love it because it starts a little sharp, but then that mid palate is just big and bold and stone fruit and milk chocolate.
The butter, you get the butterscotch. Like that is just, it's so, yeah, that's damn good. Like it's just a good sipping. Really
and that was the goal. The goal was we really wanted to create something that was accessible. You know, it's, you know, as you know, especially within the American single malt realm, there's so many different variations and so many different like takes on it that, you know, like if you can't find something that you like from someone else, you know, someone else is probably going to have it. And so kind of the classic was, you know, can we create this really solid backbone of a unique American single malt?
All right. Well, I mean, I think, again, I can't wait to, like, this is just 1 of 5, so this is going to be amazing. But, I mean, digging into question 1, I think you have probably another one of those unique little origin stories, and I can't wait to hear this. But, like, again, how did you end up in the whiskey business? You went from, like, journalism to public relations to marketing to whiskey, like, a distiller. Like, I mean, you were at Tails, like you were like a Tails guy, like working at Tails. Like, how did you end up in the whiskey business?
Oh, you know, I feel like a lot of us just, I fell into it, you know, incredibly, incredibly lucky. A lifetime ago, I was an investigative reporter. My degrees, I have a Bachelor of Science in Journalism, and got out of school and was like, that's what I'm going to be. You know, I was inspired by journalists like Carl Hyacin from the Miami Herald, of course, Hunter S. Thompson, just really being inspired by that kind of really aggressive kind of gonzo investigative journalism. And, you know, I got out and I did that for a couple of years. Ended up moving back to my hometown of Dodge City, Kansas, took over running the newspaper there. I did that for a year, and it just ate me alive. I mean, I was working in like 7 a.m. to 2 a.m, 5, 6, 7 days a week. I had just gotten married. I wasn't seeing my wife. I wasn't seeing my stepson, and kind of hit a point that I just burned out, you know, and I'm in my 20s and I'm like, what am I going to do? And you know, no one really wanted to hire investigative reporters. You tend to piss off the advertisers. And so I was like, well, what do most journalists do? Most journalists go into PR and marketing. You know, it's kind of that very close linked. And there was actually an agricultural company, a relatively large national one based in my hometown. I interestingly enough, knew the CEO of this company through the local live theater. And because that's where I used to act, because once upon a time I wanted to be an actor. and yeah, so I was just like, hey, I don't know ag, but I know PR and marketing. I think you should bring me on. And they did. And so I spent 7 years as the director of communications and public relations for this company. And it was a good company. It was fun work, but it wasn't fulfilling. You know, it was kind of, you know, when you're always trying to tell positive things, it can kind of get, you know, frustrating and bog you down. And my wife and I are big foodies. And this was kind of around the time that the cocktail renaissance was finally coming in to the Midwest. You know, obviously it had been going on the coasts for a while, but finally, like, people in Kansas are starting to notice, oh, there's more than Jack and Coke.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have to drink a Harvey Wallbanger. It's not 1979 anymore.
Yeah.
And so I started freelance writing. It actually started with a conversation I posted on social media one day. I was like, okay, tonight's cocktail is X. I think it was a Kentucky coffee. And someone goes, wait, you mean to tell me you're drinking a different cocktail every single day? I was like, that's a great idea. So I did. I started a website where I did a unique cocktail every single day, and I did that for 3 years.
Okay, wow.
That got some attention from people within the industry. Some brands started sending me samples. I started doing reviews, started doing some freelance writing for bigger publications. And then around the same time, my wife and I decided that we were actually going to take over the cocktail program at the theater where we met.
Okay.
And this was kind of this chance to be like, let's bring in craft spirits. Let's start really elevating the cocktails. And we did that for almost 9 or 10 years. I mean, it was a long time that we really developed kind of this interesting cocktail program. And around that same time, I'm getting more and more restless. I'm finding this passion for spirits. I love writing about it. I love talking about it. I love running this bar program. And these 3 farmers in Dodge City had decided they were going to start a distillery. And I knew the younger of the 3 through both my agricultural work and through my cocktail work. And he reached out one day. He's like, hey, booze, ag. He's like, would you have any interest in maybe just like talking to us? Like, hey, if you want to come in and taste what we're making, be like, hey, that's good. No, that's bad. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. And I think like 2 days later, they posted a job posting for an assistant distiller and a part-time events manager. And I called him and I said, hey, I have a pitch for you. How about instead of 2 part-time people, you bring me on as your director of marketing and you let me be your distiller too? And they took a risk on me. And so after 7 years of PR and marketing, I stepped away from that job and took a crash course in distilling, learning in person, making a lot of mistakes, being very lucky that the ownership, they were learning how to distill too. And so it was kind of this altogether learning. We made a lot of mistakes. We made some really terrible stuff. Eventually we made some really good stuff. And it clicked, after I think it was probably the first year, we had opened the distillery, we had opened this tasting room. That was around the time I got accepted into the Tales of the Cocktail Cat program because I was running 2 bars. And yeah, it just kind of was like, I walked away and took a pay cut because craft distilling doesn't tend to pay as well as PR and marketing. But yeah, I've never looked back. It's been amazing. I was there for 2.5 years and took over as the head distiller at a distillery just outside of Baltimore. And I was the head distiller there for 2.5 years. And now a little over 2 years ago, Whiskey Del Bac reached out and they said, hey, do you want to come and take the reins here? And so I've been here in Tucson since 2021.
I think that is a fucking awesome origin story. I think, just
and I feel like an asshole because also people will say, "Oh my God, you're doing my dream job. How do you get into it?" And I said, "I fell ass backwards into it. I was at the right place at the right time and just happened to know the right people. Like, I think had I set out and be like, I'm going to become a distiller, I never would have been able to do it."
Question 2, drink 2. What are we drinking?
All right. So we are drinking the Dorado. This is what we call our flagship. There we go. Kind of getting. So again, this is kind of what we were born out of. This idea of, can you create an American single malt that is using a mesquited rather than peated fire? Typically, if I was doing a tasting, we would hang on to this to the last because smoke tends to nuke your palate. But it makes sense narratively because we're talking about kind of what we're doing. So as I had mentioned, Stephen had taught himself how to malt. When Whiskey Del Bac actually started, Stephen and the original head distiller, they were malting 100% of the barley that they were using in their own single malt. As we grew, we realized pretty quickly it's not a very efficient way to do it. So as of right now, we do actually source our unsmoked malt. That is coming from a craft malt house called Tex Malt in Fort Worth. We were going with one of the bigger houses up in the Pacific Northwest, Most people probably know when I mention that, who that is. Not that they didn't make bad malt, but as we kind of had this conversation, you know, I keep calling us a love letter of the desert, and, you know, and trying to find ways we can keep things close, trying to find ways we can source things from within our neighborhood. We met the guys from Tex Malt. We were really impressed with the quality. And so a little over a year ago, we switched over to them. But one of the other things that makes us unique is we also are still doing our own smoked malt. So we do have a malt house in-house. That is also something, again, I never thought I would be doing in my career, is malting. So it's this really unique kind of funky system. It was custom designed by Steven and the engineers out of Portland, Oregon that he was working with. And again, so floor malting, it takes up a lot of space. You know, it's not efficient in space usage. And so this very unique, is essentially basically a big, what looks like a fermenter that's our steeping tank. And then we have what we call our germination and kilning tank, which is a modified mash tun. But we can do 5,000 pounds of malt at a time. That raw barley seed, comes in from Colorado. And then it takes us about a week to do the full malting process. We smoke on the 4th day. And it's kind of interesting because we're not doing like a true drying over mesquite like you do with a drying over peat. If you can find pictures of it online, and from some of the tours, we have this very kind of Rube Goldberg-esque mishmash of pipes coming in. Nice. We have this very simple smoke box out in what we call our yard, which is, you know, out behind the distillery. And then we blow this smoke that we build these fires, and we blow that smoke up through the bottom of the false bottom of the mash, or the germination and kiln tank. And it takes about 9 to 10 hours. And we do this very long, very slow smoke of velvet mesquite across the malt. We used to do a 100% smoked version of our mash bill. Again, smoke is controversial. And that has been adjusted down over time. Our current mash bill is 60% unsmoked, 40% mesquite smoked. That then is distilled into what we call our MS, which is our mesquite smoked new make. That gets aged by itself. There are still some people who weren't happy with that smoke level. And so for the Dorado that we are drinking, this is actually our MS, so our mesquite smoked, and it's blended in with a little bit of that classic.
Okay.
So one of the things, and this is one of my favorite things that we make, you know, we have special releases that we're really proud of and that we think are amazing. But like when it comes to like the day-to-day, what's in my glass, what am I mixing with? It's the Dorado.
This I love. I don't, there's like the, they come out, they're the chocolate covered cherries. They come out during Christmas. They're like in a red box.
Like the cordials.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like that. That's what I get right off on the nose, and I absolutely love it. Like that is, it just, for some reason, it just takes me right back to, get like a chocolate cherry kind of.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I always get, so it's interesting you say that. We always have these discussions when we have people in for tastings, and we'll have people that'll be like, oh, I don't want to give you tasting notes because I'm going to be embarrassed. Right. And I say, there's no wrong tasting note. Like what brings to memory what you think of, that is a valid, I get cherry Coke.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I get Coca-Cola, I get cherry, and then I get that smoke. And mesquite's really interesting because, you know, peat has that very kind of medicinal iodine-y Band-Aid note, which I do really like. It's interesting when Steven and I will give tours together. He'll always be like, and I hate that. Like, I don't. I love that. Lefroy quarter cask, one of my favorites.
The more ashtray, the better.
Yes, it's like someone soaked whiskey in a cigar ashtray, and I'm here for it.
Yep, all right.
The mesquite, though, is different. The mesquite has a very sweet note. And it's always hard to describe because people will be like, okay, what does mesquite taste like? It? Well, mesquite smells and tastes like mesquite. It is a very unique, very pronounced note that you get.
Well, I think this, because again, I think this leads perfectly into question 2, which again, you guys are a true of place kind of whiskey brand. So again, what would your what is your sales pitch when you go in to talk to somebody to get them interested? Because again, and again, please no offense, but mesquite whiskey is not you think flavor, you immediately you think it's a flavored whiskey, which it is not. It is not anything even close to that. And I can lie to you and say this is great, but my face can't. So and again, I absolutely love this. So but good. What is your because again, you've said it a few times, mesquite, not peated or not peat. So that's kind of your motto. What is your guys' sales pitch, or what is Whiskey Del Bac for people that are not familiar?
Yeah, we always say Whiskey Del Bac is a whiskey brand of place. It is of the Sonoran Desert. Again, I've always said it's a love letter. So Stephen was born in California, but he was raised here in Tucson. And so Baja, Arizona, so Tucson down south to Nogales and, the Mexican border. It's this really just striking border region, the fusion of cultures and of flavors and of experiences. And it's easy to try and be somebody else. It's one of the questions that I got a lot when I first started distilling, and still occasionally get, that always drove me nuts, was, well, who do you want to taste like? It's well, we want to taste like Whiskey Del Bac. There's already a Maker's Mark. There's already a Macallan. There's already a Balvenie. Why would we want to do that? And so, it took time to kind of develop that. And the Dorado especially, if you've never been to Southern Arizona or the Southwest in general, mesquite is also used a lot in fires and in chimeneas. And it is this warming, welcoming scent. You walk around Barrio Viejo, which is the historic district here in Tucson in the winter, and that's what you're going to smell. It is that. And we always just ask that people come in with an open mind. Again, smoke is divisive, and people will immediately sometimes be like, I don't like it. I think it's astringent. I think it's acrid. The challenge, and I think the beauty of Dorado, is finding that balance and finding that note of sweetness and that little bit of complexity to it. And again, if you've had barbecue, especially if you had Texas barbecue, you've had mesquite. It is such a ubiquitous wood to cook with. And so again, it is just kind of this idea of, how do we create a whiskey that is drinkable? Because at the end of the day, we're still a business. We still need to we still have to make good juice. We can't just be out here doing esoteric shit and hoping that we just get recognized for that. And so, yeah, it's this idea of creating something that is, again, it's sipping and drinking and just living with a winter night in the Sonoran Desert. And also, to kind of touch back on the technical side of things, because that's where I like to get really geeky, is it's a challenge, again, mesquite can overpower. It can become astringent. It can become off balance, and, blending with that idea in mind. And then we'll also have people who will say, oh, well, God, it must suck trying to make whiskey in the desert. You must have all these challenges with the temperature and with, the dryness. And we will forever argue they're not challenges, they're opportunities. Those are the things that make us taste of where we're from. There's a lot of infighting in the industry of if there can be terroir in whiskey. And there can, and not from you're not going to be able to nose and taste and tell me that this is two-row barley that was grown in Colorado and Texas. The distilling process commodifies things. But the use of mesquite, the use of the quarter casks, we do no humidity control. We have swamp coolers in the production facility to stop us from dying in the heat. And that's it. So our average per year angel share is 10%. Okay. Consistently. So if we let something sit for 5 years, we're losing half of the barrel.
Oh, wow.
But that creates this this very complex, rich, so that's a very long-winded way of saying that's our pitch. Our pitch is this is a love letter to the Sonoran Desert.
All right. Question 3, drink 3. What are we drinking?
All right, next up. So we've tasted our 2 main American single malts. We are now going to be tasting our Sentinel Straight Rye.
Nice.
So this kind of feeds perfectly off of that question you were just talking about of, where do we go from here? Obviously, we're known for our single malts. Single malts are our bread and butter. It's what we've been making. We got the question a lot. Would you ever consider a bourbon? Would you ever consider a rye? And again, we're a small system. There's 2, sometimes 4 of us back there working to make sure we've got enough juice to go into barrels for our stuff. And our CEO used to be with High West.
Okay.
And so one of the conversations that we had when he came on board, because he came on board a year before I did, and he's the one who hired me, was, we have these questions. Would you ever consider another whiskey? Well, we're not set up for that. We are maximized for American single malt production. Would we ever consider sourcing? And, sourcing, it's getting better, but for a long time was a dirty word in the industry.
Oh, yeah.
There were bad actors who, for whatever reason, by pure coincidence, everyone's grandpappy had the exact same 95% rye mash bill.
Yeah, we found Grandpa's recipe in his boots when we were cleaning out his closet. But yeah, it just happens to be the same as everybody else's. So it's so weird. Like, how that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I guess by pure coincidence it could have happened, but every time, and it's 80% of the ryes that are out on the market. What a coincidence! But yeah, so the other challenge we have is American single malt's expensive to make. Well, single malt in general is expensive to make. Malt doesn't yield very much. It's very labor intensive. It takes a lot of time for a very small amount of product. And so the prices reflect that. Our bottles are $55, $60, $90, $120. And that is not conducive to volume sales. Like you can have amazing reviews and people loving it, but if you're not moving that volume, that can be a challenge from a business perspective. And so for over a year, I mean, it happened before I was even on board, but even a year after I came on board, were these discussions of, if we do a sourced product, the goal would be from a business standpoint to make money, would be the volume driver. Like that would be what would end up on cocktail menus, what would end up being in the rail. And that would then support what we love to do, which is the American single malt. And, cards on the table, having made bourbon at my last 2 distilleries, I'm not a huge bourbon fan. I know that's blasphemous. It's never been my go-to. I've always loved a good rye. Yeah. And the same went for Stephen. And so as this conversation developed, we were like, okay, we're not going to do a bourbon, because also the bourbon market right now is just so saturated. I mean, trying to launch a new bourbon is kind of surreal. And so we're like, well, let's do a rye then. We like the flavor profile, and we were like, okay, let's put a call out. And so we actually sourced over 100 samples of rye from all over the country, big distilleries, small distilleries. We tasted a lot of really good rye that was way out of our price range. We tasted a lot of really shitty rye that was way out of our price range. And we ended up coming back to MGP. There's a reason they're the #1 rye producer in the country. They make a solid, consistent, accessible rye. And we kind of hated ourselves for it at first. Like, of course, we're going to go with the one that everyone does. But we also knew, again, this brand is built on this ethos of transparency and this ethos of being of where we're from. And so we knew we couldn't just take rye, put it into a bottle, call it our own. Like that's not what we do. And so obviously the immediate thought is, well, finishing. We're producing this mesquite smoked single malt. It's what we're known for. It's kind of our flagship. Let's just take this rye, let's finish it in our mesquite smoked barrels, and that'll be it. And so we got a handful of some 2- and 3-year-old rye barrels, blended it all together, laid it down in our own barrels, and we went to go sensory them, and it was good, but it wasn't different enough. It was still clearly MGP juice.
Okay.
And again, not that there's anything wrong with that, but you want to create something unique.
Right,
And
right.
I will always maintain I have never had a good idea. I have only stolen other people's good ideas. And thinking about the Tennessee process, where the whiskey is filtered across a bed of sugar maple charcoal. I was like, well, we are producing a shitload of mesquite charcoal during our malting process. What would happen if we took this mesquite finished rye, and then after we finished it, we filtered it across a bed of mesquite charcoal?
Oh.
And that kind of clicked. It changed the mouthfeel of it. It changed kind of the palate from the mid to the back end, and it completely evolved the nose. And so that's what became our Sentinel Straight Rye. It is this idea of, again, creating something unique. We are also, again, that focus on transparency of showing where everything came from. I always point out on the bottle, if you look at the back, we straight up say it is distilled and aged in Indiana, but it is finished, blended, and bottled by us in Tucson. And so kind of what you end up is what we've, right there. Right there.
Sorry.
There we
go. Boom.
The name Sentinel came from a couple of different places. So there is what's called sometimes a mountain or Sentinel Peak just outside of downtown Tucson. It's actually where the Tana Autumn people would use as a lookout spot. You can see Sentinel Peak from our distillery. And then also the idea of being sentinel and stewards of our environment. I always feel weird saying this because we haven't put it in stone yet, but the goal is, as this brand grows, because this just came out in November of last year, so this is super, super new. As soon as we can get the volume up and as soon as we can establish the parameters, the goal is that a percentage of sales of all of these bottles will go back to conservation as well, specifically conservation within the Sonoran Desert area, because being good sentinels of where we're from. So a little bit of mesquite, a lot of rye influence.
Well, I can tell you right now, the nose is just fucking glorious. Like, this is just absolutely amazing.
And again, and that was the goal, was every time, so this is the second batch that we're tasting. So this just came out this summer. And the reaction to the initial batch was amazing. We got all this amazing feedback. We tweaked a little. We made it kind of with the first one. We got some feedback that it was a little too sweet. It didn't have that kind of black pepper rye herbal hit. So there's a little bit more of that in this one. But again, you kind of just want that slightest hint of mesquite in there to tie it back to what we're doing. But also you want it to stand up in cocktails, but also still be sipped by itself.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, question 3 then. Again, we talk a lot about how you guys are like one of the, 4 founders in the American Single Malt category. Where do you see your guys' place in that? And then where do you think, again, fingers crossed on when it actually becomes a where do you see that category officially growing?
That's a great question. It kind of, to touch base what we had talked about at the beginning, we were even talking about our classic, that this idea that one of the things that I've absolutely fallen in love with the American Single Malt category is we're given 4 ingredients: malted barley, water, yeast, and the barrel. Those are the only 4 things we can use. But in those 4 things, we have this just absolutely insane plethora of options of how to create our own unique creations from distillery to distillery. And I see us kind of continuing to do what we've been doing, honestly. It's interesting. We've had these conversations sometimes that we're very upfront. We are an Arizona brand. We are a Tucson, Arizona brand. We are of the place we are from. And we'll occasionally have people say, well, maybe you should downplay that. Like, really, is being from Arizona, that's going to be a marketing thing? And our response is, Kentucky gets to do it.
Yeah, why not?
Ireland gets to do it. Scotland gets to do it. They get to be like, yes, this is where we're from. That's our place. Our place is to be like, if you want an American single malt that tastes of the place it is from, that is us. And we're not going to be for everybody. And we understand that. But talking about those 4 ingredients we work with, that leads into the, I think, regionality that you can already see in the American single malt movement. That, let's talk Pacific Northwest, Westland and westward. So You've got Oregon, you've got Washington, and they are completely different products. Here in the Southwest, you have us, you have Santa Fe Spirits. They have their Colkegan brand. They have a mesquited American single malt like we do, and it is nothing like ours. In fact, we have a bottle of it at the distillery that we will occasionally tell people, you need to try this, because Colin Keegan, who owns the distillery, he's focused on creating something that is in used cooperage, ages multiple years, and you can be like, oh, well, Del Bac and Santa Fe make a mesquited American single malt. They're completely different products. And what I hope to see, and I think you're already seeing, is this idea of leaning into where you're from and creating something that is unique and is varied. For better or for worse, and I say this loving rye and other American whiskeys like wheat whiskey. I love American wheat whiskey. You kind of know what to expect. There is this kind of expectation that when I taste bourbon, yes, there's going to be variations from brand to brand, but I know what bourbon's going to be. I know what rye is going to be. We will occasionally do educational flights where we'll have Westland, Westward, us, Stranahan's, Andalusia out of Texas, and be like, okay, taste all of these and tell us which one isn't a single malt. And usually someone will be like, oh, well, this one's a bourbon, or, this one I think is a wheat whiskey. And like, tricked you. They're all single malts. That's how disparate they are.
Well, no. And that actually, I think you kind of answered even my follow-up question off of that. Cause do you think that more regions will get a little bit more specific with that single malt category? Cause
I hope so. Like, I really do. I mean, it's funny you asked that. We actually just had this conversation with a journalist who I can't remember who we were talking to about, but they asked that question. Like, so Scotland, you have Islay, Speyside, Highland, Campbelltown. Like, do you see that happening within like the American whiskey? And I would love to see that. But to me, I also think that's the appeal, is you can have so much difference from brand to brand that if you found one that you taste and you go, I didn't really like that American single malt, maybe you didn't like this one, but if you try X, Y, or Z, they're gonna have what you want. And getting that designation, I think, will help. It helps kind of legitimize. It's interesting. So Stephen is on the board of directors for the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, but as he was also tell people, he wasn't one of the founding members. We've been doing this 12 years. Everyone was kind of doing their own thing. And then you had Steve Hawley really kind of start bringing people together and be like, hey, we're all doing this thing kind of separate. How about if we band together and we kind of work to create this designation? We work to legitimize American single malt as its own category within American whiskey. And, I think maybe sometimes that could work against us, that there is so much variation that, I could see a person maybe going, well, I don't fuck with American single malt because it's so different. And
right.
I don't have an idea what X is going to taste like versus Y. But no, I would love to see that. I mean, there are already conversations happening like that. Like, there have been times that, again, us and Balcones and Andalusia and Santa Fe have all been mentioned in the same breath of the Southwest Southern style of American single malts, leaning into the hot weather, leaning into the drier aging conditions. You do tend to have these bolder, more aggressive American single malts that you taste what we're making and it's not Scotch. And we've had people even say, like, you guys are a good kind of transition from bourbon to Scotch because we're using new American oak, because we're getting that heavy barrel influence, and I don't find offense in that, really. Like, that it's something that I think if we can bring more attention to the category, then I think we're doing our job right.
All right. Question 4, drink 4. What are we drinking?
All right. So I'm really excited for this, as you can tell. This is our Normandy. This
All
is,
right.
I was trying to get that not in that light. There we go.
There we go.
So the Normandy, this is part of what we call our Global Cask Collection. So, yeah. So in the past, we've done what we call our distiller's cuts. And these are, we can get our hands onto interesting barrels that we can finish with. We can get our hands on maybe something a little more exotic and play around with. Plus, it lets the distillers be creative. The challenge that sometimes happen is we'll create something that people really, really like, and then we'll be like, oh, well, we're never going to have that again. So,
Yeah.
And we had this discussion of, how do we create something then that kind of echoes the Distiller's Cut series, but is replicable, like something that we can do year after year. And we sat down, we analyzed a bunch of past Distiller's Cuts. We looked at some of the reviews we got, and the two big ones that we got were our Pedro Jimenez finished of the unsmoked of our classic. That's what became our Frontera. The Frontera comes out every spring.
Okay.
The other one was our Calvados finished. So Calvados is an apple and pear brandy from the Normandy region of France. I have a massive, massive soft spot for apple brandy. And so, so then we were like, okay, let's find a way to utilize these Calvados casks. And so the Normandy is our classic. So it starts with our 100% unsmoked single malt, aged for a year in our quarter casks. And then it's finished in a mix of second, third, fourth, and fifth use Calvados casks. One of the reasons we really focus on those multiple uses is it's really easy to overfinish in apple brandy. There's a lot of acetaldehyde. There's a lot of very bright, aggressive, kind of bitey notes. And I'm excited for you to try it, but I'll also cop up front. This is one of my favorite things that we make. This is batch 2 that just came out last weekend. So
all right. Well, cheers. No pressure at all. Wait. The nose is fucking amazing.
It's, to me, you get that brightness of the apple brandy right up front. It is that crisp fall day.
Yep.
And to me, I always say this is like drinking caramel apples.
Yes.
Like
very much. Yeah.
It's why it's our autumn release. It is this focus on, again, seasonality and bringing people to a time and a place.
Oh. Yeah, that's fucking awesome. Wow.
Oh. Yeah, I'm probably going to kill this bottle.
Wow, yeah. The caramel apple. Like, that is... Yep, that's what it is. Like, that's... All right, so question 4. Again, you've said throughout the interview that you're living, some people's dream jobs. You got 14 years of experience, 7 years distilling experience. You fell into the job ass backwards. But what advice would you have for somebody that wants to get in, like follow in your footsteps?
So it's this. Oh God, yeah. be lucky like that. So it's funny. I was watching Nicole's interview, and like her kind of comment of like, "Oh man, come in with an open mind." That's kind of one of the big things. Is again, I was at the right place, right time. There's that adage of luck is preparation and chance meeting together. Get involved. If you're passionate about it. I never made money on the bartending thing, really. I mean, we were running a bar for a not-for-profit theater. I made a little bit of money doing my freelance spirits and cocktail writing, but it was a passion project. I worked in a job I didn't really enjoy for almost a decade, and just kind of taking those chances, being willing to make mistakes. Like that's a big thing is, and sometimes unfortunately that's a matter of your situation. You know, if I was lucky enough that my first distillery, we were all learning, and that gave us the grace to make bad fucking decisions. Like to be able to be like, wow, we really missed the boat on this. And that's another point of being lucky. Like sometimes you're not allowed that. You don't have that opportunity to make those mistakes, or you won't have, say, like bosses that are that forgiving, or a very good friend of mine is kind of in a similar position. You know, he's at a job right now that he doesn't like, but he's passionate about bartending, passionate about spirits. And he just texted me yesterday and he's like, oh my God, I just got this job at this whiskey bar and I'm really excited for it. I'm back behind the bar again. And it's just a matter of again, I hate saying being lucky but I also understand I could sit here and bullshit you and be like, you know, it's not to say I haven't busted my ass. I feel like I have. I feel like I've worked hard, but my hard work is not what has gotten me here. It has been hard work and just pure luck of the draw. The good thing is the industry is growing. You know, we're all seeing challenges. Pandemic is still having long-lasting impacts on the craft spirits industry.
Yep.
While people are still drinking, people have started going back to their old favorites, and to be in a position where you are starting something brand new and trying to get a foothold in the market is challenging. But, you know, I always tell people I'm on the board of directors for the American Craft Spirits Association. I'm involved with their education committee, things like that. I always try to stress to people, you know, use the community you have, use the support, and have these conversations. And through all of this, have an idea of what you want to be doing. One of the worst things you can do, I think, is come into the industry and not have clarity of vision. Because when I got involved, there were maybe 300 craft distilleries in the country. There's around 3,000 now.
Yeah.
And so for a while, I think you could probably coast by on just being the craft distillery. Hey, there's someone making something unique and different than what I can get at the liquor store. There's not that luxury anymore. And knowing what you want to do, knowing how you want to do it, and the advice that I still always give, I give to myself, is make mistakes, but then own those mistakes. I've been in the industry a while, and I find myself saying more and more, the more I know, the less I know. I'll be like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I got this on lock. This is a breeze. And something will go completely wrong. And I'll go, I don't have a fucking clue what I'm doing. Or you talk to other people and you go, wow, they've forgotten more than I know right now. And that's the amazing thing about the industry, though, is leaving PR and marketing, which is just a brutally cutthroat industry, which makes people miserable. Like, it's one of the reasons I hated it, is you would reach out to colleagues and you'd be like, hey, I need assistance with this, or I have this challenge, and they would actively try to screw you up. Because if you screwed up, that gave them a foothold to go above. Yeah. And while you do occasionally have those bad actors within this industry, for the most part, it's one of the reasons I immediately fell in love with it. You don't have that. You have that support. You have places like ACSA. You have these forums where you can talk to other people who are going through the exact same thing, and that you can be vulnerable with. I wouldn't have been nearly as successful if I didn't have that support, if I didn't have that group. That I've been lucky enough to have those people that I can call. And again, just, you feel like you're alone sometimes.
Yeah. No. And like so many distillers and like blenders and everybody, they always say that I can go ahead and call such and such. And like, they may be a direct competitor, but I can be like, I'm having this problem. Did you guys have this problem? And how did you have? And people immediately will be like, yeah, we did this, or fuck, no, we never even, wow. But
I know someone who went through it, and let me get you into contact with them.
Yeah. Because that's the one thing, I think that, the community is all about, just rising tide raises all ships. And I think that is one of the great things about the spirits industry is, yes, you said there are a lot of those bad actors that, are in it for themselves, but the majority of the people are in it for the community. And I think that's where, again, you even have the tattoo to prove it. So, but yeah. It's,
this one or this one?
I mean, yeah, I was talking about the tails tattoo, but yeah.
Well, and same. I always felt kind of guilty. I got accepted into the Tails Cocktail Apprentice program as I was transitioning away from the bartending side and focusing on the production side. But I still use those lessons learned, and I'm still close to those people that I was with at Tails and people I've met through Tails to be like, hey, sometimes even just sending them samples of the juice I'm making.
Right.
And being like, I think this is good, but I also know I'm biased towards myself. So I need someone who's going to be honest and tell me this is shit. No one's going to buy it. Because that's another piece of advice. One that I will always beat is be willing to accept when you're wrong. That is a hard lesson to learn. I've been lucky. My wife has never hesitated to tell me when I'm wrong, but in a supportive way, not in people are like, oh, that sounds terrible. No, not in a, oh, my wife, she's a shrew. She has always been willing to be like, you did amazing on this, or, hey, I think you're off base.
Yeah.
And developing the people who can be honest with you. The first 2-3 years when I was distilling, the joke I always made was when I would go out and try and do market work with our sales staff, you would take your product and you would pour it and you would have someone go, wow, that's the worst thing I've ever tasted. And it used to be, I'd be like, hey, here's my heart and soul. Here's blood, sweat, and tears, sleepless nights. Please shit all over it. Tell me how much you fucking hate it.
Please.
But as I've matured as a distiller, I've come to learn, no, that's what you need to do. If I'm making garbage product, my business is going to fail.
Right.
And it's not my business. It's the owners. It's my coworkers. It's my colleagues. It's all of us are tied into this. And if the product sucks, I really need to know that.
Yeah. Please, that. I think that's the perfect way to end it. Please just shit over my heart, my blood, sweat, and tears, and my soul,
and I will use that to make it better.
Yeah. So, question 5, drink 5. We're coming down to our last drink of the night. It's kind of sad. I'm really freaking enjoying this. This is awesome. But what are we drinking?
Okay, so I'm really excited, and I wanted to end on this. That is something that is from us, but not from us. So this is the Lost Lantern Desert Dessert. Obviously, sample bottles for this because this is very limited supply.
Well, I love that we both have the handwritten label. So I was like, that's absolutely amazing.
Well, so this is my artistic work. This is a reason I was never an artist. But so Lost Lantern, I don't know if you're familiar with Adam and Nora. Yeah. So
we've interviewed them. Yeah. They've done the show. So yeah.
Yeah, I've watched that interview. I don't know why I forgot. But yeah, it's so Adam and Nora, obviously just absolutely amazing people, amazing blenders. Just you could not ask for nicer people within this industry. They're very close with Stephen and Elaine and Amanda. And in fact, one of their first single barrel releases in 2020 was Whiskey Del Bac. And, we've stayed in close contact with them. We've been really, passionate about and absolutely thrilled to see the success they've been having. So this is what they call their desert dessert. So I kind of have an idea of how they do it with other distilleries, but one of the first projects I got to do at Whiskey Del Bac was basically being told, hey, Adam and Nora are coming in and they want to taste through some barrels, and they're thinking they may want to do a blend. And so I got really excited. So I've gotten better about letting things go and not being a hyper control freak about things, but I'm still kind of a control freak about my barrels. And so I went through and I was like, okay, I've got 12 of our standard barrels, and then I've got 3 to 4 finishing casks that I'd be willing to give up. Like, they're tasty. And I guess maybe this made me just like too brash, but when I had this conversation with them, I was like, you don't get to taste my best stuff because you're going to want to buy it and I'm going to keep it for myself. But we had this,
no soup for you.
I mean, it was, they told me a story of a distillery they were at, and they had been drinking. Everyone was feeling really good. The distiller was like, wait till you try this. Tasted them on it, and they're like, yeah, that's what we want. They talked to the distiller's supervisor, and he was like, well, if he had you taste it, surely it's for sale. So they bought it, and the distiller was like, well, shit, I just... But yeah, so I gave them kind of this lineup of barrels, and they spent 2 days tasting through them and coming up with these blends. And I think what's amazing again about how good they are, you know, their Balcones, their Gentle Giant just won all these insane awards. And Balcones was even like, they blended better than we did. They blended better than we did. We gave them access to some of our heavier smoked stuff. And in fact, it was 2 different barrels. One that was finished in Pinot de Charence, which Pinot de Charence is this French aperitif wine. It's actually basically eau de vie of cognac. It's Uni Blanc grapes. It's very interesting. It's very complex. I can't take credit for that finishing barrel. A dear friend and mentor of mine, Maggie Campbell, who used to be with Privateer. She's now down as the estate manager at Mount Gay Rum. She was the one, while consulting with Whiskey Del Bac, was like, hey, your smoked stuff, I think would be really good with this Pinot de Charence finish. And so we got these barrels, and even like 1 month in, it was already just this beautiful, rich influence on it. And then in the summer of 2021, one of our distiller's cuts was a Sauterne barrel, which just, again, this dessert wine, so bright, floral, sweet, with our classic. We were like, okay, let's take a little bit of that and a little bit of our smoked and put it back into the Sauterne barrel. And those were the 2 that they focused on. And they were like, wow, these 2 have this very rich, very interesting note. And so it's the reason they call it Desert Dessert. It's our MS, it's our smoked, but it's finished in these dessert wine barrels. And the 2 just blended together is just, again, to me, like, just really underlines the amazing work that Lost Lantern is doing, and kind of, to me, also underlines what a lot of these amazing independent bottlers are doing. And that kind of, you know, another thing I've changed my tune on as I've gotten older and been in the industry longer is distilling is super important. Blending doesn't get the attention that I think it should. Because you can have amazing juice that's aged well, but if you blend it poorly, it's off balance. And just to give a shout out to Adam and Nora and the amazing work they're doing, and the importance of good blending, is the Desert Dessert.
Cheers to that.
Also, we're ending cask strength. So.
Oh, that's good. That's nice. That's got like a little creme brulee in there. Like, it's just... Oh.
The sweetness, it's a dessert. It is like, it's like if I were to pour a port wine, like a tawny port at the end of a meal, but if I'm doing an American single malt. That's one of the reasons just I absolutely was enamored with it.
Oh, this is really good. Oh, yeah, it's just, so damn good. All right. So, question 5 comes down to the flip of the Whiskey Wednesday coin. You can flip it, you can spin it, you can do whatever you want. Oh, don't break your glass.
As I break my glass.
I was going to say, it's heavy as shit. So, like,
this is hefty.
Yeah, the coin, it's a weapon. Like, everybody, always, when I give it to them, they're always like, wow, that's really heavy. And I was like, yep. And bulletproof. So, like, I'm like, you can go ahead and just put it in your coat pocket. Like, if someone shoots you, like, it will be like, boom, and then yeah, like it totally is up. But so question 5 is, it's just a silly way to end the night. So again, we appreciate your time joining us, but the coin will give us the answer. You don't have to answer, but please feel free to answer if you want to. But so question 5, if you were granted the superpower to be able to turn anything into whiskey right now, but the only caveat is you would lose your sense of taste, would you do it?
Oh, fuck no. I don't even need to go to the coin. Fuck no.
Oh, no.
Are you kidding me? Like, I'm selfish enough. I like enjoying the whiskey. I like being able to taste that. I mean, well, I appreciate the thought. Like, man, that would make my job so much easier. But
well, again, I was like, because I was like, oh, should I ask this question or not? But then when you were like, oh, even my in-laws hate me when we go out, and I was like, yep, this is a perfect question just to wrap it up. So
yeah, no, it's sometimes I think it's a New Yorker cartoon that it's this pianist, and he's at the piano, and it's drawn to see this massive concert crowd in the background, and his thought bubble says, wow, I fucking hate this. And underneath the caption, it says, the sign of a true professional. And sometimes it does feel like that. Like sometimes it is, we have dear friends who we've bonded over whiskey, and I will make these comments of, well, I spent 2 hours sitting with this one blend. And they're like, I never would have even thought that. I'm like, yeah, sometimes it's like, God, I kind of wish I could just enjoy whiskey again. But then being able to do things like this and like being able to revisit blends and distillations of the past has been, it's getting the buzz is fun. Yeah. But to me, it's the point of being able to like assess what you're tasting and just really sit and enjoy it. And no, I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us. That's 5 drinks down, 5 questions answered. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. It was a true pleasure.
Absolutely amazing.
But again, hopefully we can drink together in person very soon. Again, if you're ever in New York, please look me up.
I'm going to be in your neck of the woods in December.
Perfect. Please hit me up. I would love to show you around. We got some great places. I might be in your neck of the woods around October. So
our doors are open.
Yeah. So cheers to you. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bum